And to discuss this, I'm joined by Bolu Michael-Biyi, foreign policy analyst in Eswatini. Thank you so much, Bolu, for always being available to speak to us. So let's move to the basic. How significant is the reopening of the Rahar crossing, from a humanitarian standpoint, given the strict limits on movement? Does it signal genuine relief, calculated political pressure, or something else?
All right, thank you for having me. I hope you've had a nice day. I think the reopening is just symbolic. It's basically just symbolic, but in practice is underwhelming. I'm going to explain because after months of total closure, any opening would definitely feel like a breakthrough, to definitely feel like progress. But when only, few people are allowed to cross and there's zero goods, then we can't really call humanitarian breakthrough in any way, because when we're looking at it from a humanitarian lens, it is grossly inadequate. We're talking about a besieged population of over 2 million people. Thousands of them are critically ill, and the crossing is processing maybe 50 patients a day. That's no relief. That's basically rationing of hope. It's just textbook calculated political pressure, nothing really genuinely about humanitarian concern here, because Israel controls that territory. Israel controls the valve. They decide who leaves, they decide when, they decide under what conditions people are going to cross through that strait. So that kind of control isn't about saving lives primarily, in my opinion. It's about leverage. It's about using the problems of people as a bargaining chip to basically maintain leverage in that area. So the significance in it is that it reveals power dynamics is like, in war times.
All right, now this opening we know was tied to conditions in President Trump's ceasefire plan, and the return of an Israeli hostages buddy. Now, I'm actually tempted to ask what this tells us about how humanitarian access is being used as leverage in the conflict, but you have actually answered that. But, with about 20,000 sick and wounded Palestinians reportedly waiting to leave Gaza, what are the implications of allowing just 50 patients a day? And how does this align with, international humanitarian obligations?
Well, it tells us everything we need to know, that humanitarian access is being used as a bargaining chip. It's being weaponized. It's not treated as a fundamental right, as meant to be, as guaranteed in the law. It's treated as a tradable commodity, for political negotiation. The fact that opening a border crossing for dying patients will require the return of the body of hostages, so it shows that it's highly transactional. Just, lives on one side are being used as bargaining chip for closure on the other side. So President Trump's framework, I feel it commodified access in that area. It's like saying that you want your wounded evacuated and you have to meet this condition first, which shouldn't really be the case. From Israel's perspective, they feel that every concession must be reciprocal. They need to do something to get something. That's not an humanitarian gesture at all. But humanitarian gestures are meant to be obligations under international law. But we're seeing it as negotiation points, which should not be the case. So the broader pattern is that humanitarian corridor, the medical evacuations, and the food supply, it has all become the pawn in a chess game, and that's why people are stuck in Gaza. And it's just unfortunate that the people that are in critical need of succor are being used as pawns in this war.
Okay, so the crossing is being managed by EU supervisors, Palestinian staff, and also remote Israeli security checks. Would you say that this arrangement is sustainable? Are there risks or benefits, that this arrangement actually poses for neutrality and trust?
Well, on paper, everything looks good. It looks like, smart multilateralism. You've got the EU involved, their neutrality is speaking. The Palestinians, they have the local knowledge, and then the Israeli, they have their security operatives. They're all present there. But in practice, it's basically adding a layer of bureaucracy. It's creating friction and massive delay. So the sustainability question hinges basically trust. And in this equation, in this matter, the trust is it's basically absent, or let me say in short supply. Well, the EU supervision can facilitate a couple of things, but they cannot really override Israelis in that area because they control everything. They have the veto power. The Palestinian staff, they can process people, but they cannot speed up remote Israeli checks. They don't have power over those kind of things. So, but there's another aspect of it, and that's the aspect of shared responsibility. So there's no single party that can totally take the blame because now the EU is involved, Palestinians are involved, Israelis. So if things go wrong, theoretically, you cannot pick just one party and blame them for it. But I feel that what is way more in this aspect is the decision-making process. The bottlenecks are increasing. There's no clear line of authority. The remote Israeli security checks are the critical choke point, and they control everything. And Israel controlling everything, they get instruction from the US. So technically, indirectly, the US is controlling that area.
So what about Egypt? They have actually insisted, on a two-way movement through Rafah. How central is Egypt's position in shaping what happens next at the crossing and in border Gaza, border Gaza negotiations?
Okay, I sometimes feel bad for Egypt because they are accidental parties in this war because of their geographical location. They just have to be involved in some way. So Egypt is very central in this war. They are arguably more central than people may realize. That Rafah border crossing isn't just a crossing; it's Egypt's pathway to Gaza, and Cairo has immense leverage over where that Rafah crossing is going to work or not. The two-way movement that they want is Egypt's red line, because they don't want to be the one to be seen facilitating a one-way exodus that empties the whole of Gaza into their country. That's going to create a massive refugee crisis, and they've learned over history, and they don't want another displacement crisis to take place. So Egypt, they have legitimate security concerns that are very real. They worry about militant weapons, instability spilling across the border. So while they want to give humanitarian access and help people, they also want to maintain a tight control to have a situation whereby they can manage so that tension does not shape everything they do in the end.
Okay, so now moving away from that and looking ahead, do you see this limited reopening as a first step towards restoring Rafah as a full humanitarian corridor, or is it more likely to remain a tightly controlled, symbolic opening amidst ongoing conflict?
Okay, I'll go for the latter because I'm quite skeptical that it's going to become a full humanitarian corridor anytime soon, for the reasons I raised in the last question. The conditions that led to the closure is very critical. There's mutual distrust, there's security concerns, the political leverage. They've not really changed per se. So the reopening is, I believe, is conditional, is limited, and essentially fragile. So the pattern we've seen repeatedly in this conflict is that there's a small opening that looks like progress, followed by another closure. And this back and forth, that's what we've been seeing so far. So don't be surprised that it might be closed again anytime, because that's the pattern. They open, it looks like progress, they close it again, and all that. So I'm just trying to be optimistic as much as possible that the back and forth, the opening and closure would stop one day, and people in Palestine will be able to live their lives freely, and Egypt won't have any humanitarian crisis, and of course have Israel to sheathe their sword as well.